Hi everybody, how you going? Louise Plant here with my 144 topics. And this week's topic is really about hurt people. And I just think I'd really like to explore that and to talk about that with you, because the reality is that, people who only ever hurt other people are people who are hurting themselves. And it's very easy for us to sort of get stuck in this cycle, and I've done that myself, and in the past I've been aggressive, I've been violent, I've been, abusive. Like, I've experienced a lot of that in my life. Like, I've lived with a lot of abuse for quite a lot of times, But then there comes a point where you start realizing that it's revenge is no good. Not no good. Revenge doesn't really get you anywhere. Blame doesn't really get you anywhere. You can stay in this constant cycle of hurting and hating and all the rest of it, and it doesn't serve anyone, and it doesn't serve yourself, and it doesn't serve the people that you're involved with. So once we start to realize and be mindful, and yes, there is a rodent running around behind me. Once you start to be mindful and realise the fact that, it's really only people who are hurting that will hurt people. And then you can sort of then understand a little bit more about people and why they want to do that, because hurt people. So that's the sort of, that's where that sort of comes to there. So what do we do in those situations? What is it that we can actually do in those situations? I mean, the first thing is to have an understanding of knowing that if people are actually hurting other people, then, something's not right for them. They're disconnected from themselves. They're disconnected from their God, their higher selves. They're not centered. They're not in a really good space. So, it still is really highly inappropriate to take that hurt and take that frustration and take that out onto other people. So, it's finding a way and an ability to actually sort of do that. So, when we do understand that people who are hurting are actually hurting other people, then it doesn't mean that we can excuse the behaviour that they do, or the behaviour that's actually going on. But it is really important for us to look at redefining our boundaries in that, and redefining, where is that point where that is acceptable and that is unacceptable. So, I was a person who was never raised with a lot of boundaries. I was a rebel. I rebelled against everything. So, even now, and even as an adult, like even as a child that grows, I've raised, been involved with 5 children. There are always new boundaries that we have to set as we go into new areas of our life, as we experience new things, as we go through, new environments or new jobs or whatever situation it is. There's always this element of having to create a new boundary and saying, okay, this is the line, and this is the line that you draw in the sand, and anything beyond that is unacceptable. So if you have your boundaries in place and you know what your boundaries are, then it's important for you to understand and to know, okay, well, what are the consequences for that? What are the consequences if somebody withdraws, steps over that line? I remember in the past, in a relationship, the abusive, verbally abusive with each other, and there had to be a point where I had to draw a line in the sand and say, do you know what, if you continue to talk to me in that manner, I'm going to remove myself from the room. And you can look at that as saying, okay, well, that's me running away and I'm backing off and I'm having to do something. But, how about if you to reframe that in another way and say, well, instead of being in a situation where it's not pleasant, it's abusive, it's violating, it's hurting, wouldn't it be preferable to put yourself into a space where it feels better? And having gone through periods in my life where I've experienced a lot of stress and anxiety, and, there's been many experiences that I've had, sometimes I've sat in bed and my head's churning and I'm like, what if, and this and that, and just not really able to release that feeling of churning anxiety, sometimes even panic. Though, having more practices of embodiment and allowing yourself to come into your body. But I would say if you're ever in that space, then just get up and watch something on TV, watch a comedy, or do something that's going to look at changing your headspace from that churning sort of feeling that you're having, or the thoughts going over your head again and again and again, and look at putting yourself into a space where at least it's a preferable thing. So part of the words that you probably might hear me say again and again and again is always reach for a better space. So if it's better for you to be sitting there watching something on the telly or watching a movie than to have your head churning and churning and going round and round, then do that. Like, that is a preferable thing. If it's preferable for you to draw that line in the sand and say, look, if you continue to talk to me in this way, then I shall remove myself from the situation. If it's preferable for you to go, sleep in another room, be in another space, whatever it is that you need to do to make yourself feel better. Unfortunately, when it comes to the roles and the game playing in, relationships, in scenarios where one says one thing and one says something back, and, we can very much get lost in that because we're often not told or taught how to express ourselves in these situations. And it can be something just quite as simply as saying is learning to express what your needs are. And again, I wasn't raised in a space or environment where I was taught to do that. So I didn't know how to express what my needs are. So, now my kids sometimes mock and joke and say things like, "Ooh, you hurt my feelings." But I do know the kids are being raised to say that. And if somebody says something that hurt their feelings, then they can say, what you said hurt my feelings. And that's okay to say that. It doesn't mean that you have to do anything about it. It doesn't mean that you're passing any judgment. It doesn't mean that you're putting an opinion or criticizing or anything like that. But you're really just saying that, what you're saying or how you've spoken to me is hurting me. And that is a really healthy thing to do, because what most people do not do, and I'm still learning to do this now, heading up to 50 in my life, I'm still learning to release and to let go of unresolved emotions and feelings in my body that then act as a trigger for something else that can move me into a space of being hurt, of being reactive, of being frustrated, of being violated, or whatever the feelings are. So it's really important to acknowledge, acknowledge and validation are two really important things that we need to be having in our life. So the first person that we must acknowledge and validate is ourselves. So it's really important for us to acknowledge and validate what's happening in our lives. So I have a few charts with, lists of emotions and feelings in there, because sometimes I can be feeling something and I'm like, I'm not quite sure what this is, but because I've been working with my feeling body for so long now, that I'm really aware that I can pinpoint certain feelings of uncertainty, of unfulfillment, of insecurity, of frustration, of irritation, of annoyance, of, sadness, of grief, of joy, of happiness. And I can actually distinguish between those because I have chosen to connect with my feeling body and work with that feeling body and just allow itself to be that way. So it's really mindful to know that, when we do have a feeling, it's just a feeling, okay? It's not who we are. I'm not Louise, angry Louise. I am Louise, and it's just a feeling that I'm having, and it will pass. But the thing is, if I don't acknowledge that feeling, it can sometimes not pass. And it can sit there and it can store itself into some part in my body, and it can store itself as something waiting to be triggered later on, or it can store itself in the shape of disease. So it's really important to acknowledge what the feelings are, and even in some ways just to welcome them and just allow themselves to be that way. So, with hurt people, hurting people, the other thing that you can actually look at doing is, we cannot change other people's behaviours. We cannot change how they are. We cannot change who they are. We just can't do that. We can't change other people. And if you're in a situation or a relationship where you're trying to change someone else to make yourself feel happy, it's not going to fucking work. It's just not going to work. Okay, so accept them for what they are, and even maybe let go of the fact of wanting to change it or wanting it to be different, because it isn't. It is the way it is. So, being mindful that, when hurt people and they are hurting themselves, then, there could be something that you could look at doing is to actually forgive yourself for putting yourself in that situation. You know, it's one thing to forgive another person, but sometimes that's a really hard thing to do. And the first step of forgiveness, I believe, that ideally can be happening is learning to forgive yourself for putting yourself in that situation and allowing yourself to be treated that way, and allowing, you know, yourself to dishonor yourself or whatever it is that's happening in that situation. So, you know, to recap, know that hurt people hurt people. My cat's now there. There's rats running around. There's cats scratching at the door. This is life. We just work with what we've got. So, you know, be mindful that hurt people, and if they are hurting someone, then they are not happy, you know, and there's nothing you can do with that. You can offer to be there for them, you can offer to, you know, help them, to be a listening ear for them, but, you know, we can't sort of run in there and therapize or caretake other people, because if we're doing that to our detriment, we're actually dishonoring ourselves. So, as I said before, you know, put your boundaries in place, work out what is acceptable behavior and what is not acceptable, and work out, you know, what will be the consequences if that line is drawn over, and then stick to that. Like, this is so important with raising children, you know, like we need to know what is acceptable and what is not. And, you know, even as a woman, you know, or as a man, like we do feel secure in knowing what those boundaries are. But of course, those boundaries can be expressed in a loving and in a happy and in a time when, you know, the time to really discuss issues and behaviours and things that you don't like isn't in the heat of an argument. It's not when we're fired and we're reactive. You know, the time to be discussing these things is when we feel centered and we feel calm, and then we can have the discussion, you know. The behaviour that you did yesterday was really, I found it was quite unacceptable. And how it made me feel is it made me feel really frustrated or angry or violated or whatever it is, you know. And what I would like to see happen is that, you know, when you are feeling that way, then maybe you could distance yourself or take yourself away and remove yourself from the situation, or do something to make yourself feel better. You know, that's an example of you know, good effective communication. So let me do it again, you know. When you spoke to me in that tone of voice, it actually made me feel like I was not good enough. And, you know, what I'd really like you to do is to be more mindful of your tone of voice. And, you know, in future it would be good to be aware of, you know, of noticing that when that tone of voice can actually be quite intimidating. These are just examples. You can, you know, the template basically is, you know, when you blah, I felt blah, 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 and what I wanted to happen is blah, 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 and what I would like to happen from now on in is blah, 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 blah. And of course, there's no guarantee that people are going to take that on. There's no guarantee that people are going to listen, because not everybody listens. We have 2 ears and we have 1 mouth. So, you know, when we become more connected and more centered and we grow more spiritually, it's worth being mindful that we tend to shut up more and to listen more and to observe more. You know, 1 mouth, 2 ears, 2 eyes. So shut up, just observe, just look and see what's going on and just listen. Okay, and then it's almost like, instead of spouting bullshit or chattering noise, which so many people do, you know, you will actually look at passing something on that is of value, something that's quality, something that's beautiful, something that's giving, something that's loving. So if you're also in an environment where, you know, hurt people are hurting people, and, you know, you've drawn the boundaries in place and it's not changing, then why are you in that situation? Why are you allowing yourself to be in that situation where you're allowing that behavior around you? And what type of role model is it for you? You know, if you've got children, like, what role model is that for you? You know, I've put boundaries in place in relationships because I thought, you know, that is just unacceptable behavior. And I do not want my boys to grow up to know that that is acceptable behavior for a woman, to, you know, in treating a woman. And I've said that to them, like that is just not acceptable behaviour. And if I see you, treating a woman like that, like I have allowed myself to be treated, then I will say something, because, we have to treat people. We don't have to, okay? It is part of a natural law of the higher laws that we have to actually allow ourselves and to be in a situation where we are treated with love and respect and kindness. And if you're not in that situation, then forgive yourself for not putting yourself in that situation and change it. Just do whatever it is that you need to change. So be mindful of that, the process of working with the emotional body and clearing out shit is really powerful. Be mindful that people are hurting, but it's still no excuse for that behaviour. Be mindful of, putting your boundaries in place, and be mindful of knowing what the consequences are when that's happening. Because, I personally believe there's going to be a lot more freaking craziness that's going to go on in this world until we can actually start to really to open up to the divine love, that we are. So, there could potentially be a lot more craziness that's actually going to be going on till then. So till then, keep yourself mindful. Here's little Ratty who's running around. Hello, little Ratty. For those of you who are rodent phobic, sorry. But she's a funny little girl. Until then, you have a fabulous week and you take care of yourself. And put your boundaries in place. Be strong. Honour yourself. Forgive yourself for putting yourself in situations. And have some fun. Like, just reach for the better place. Go do something that feels good. Just reach for the better place all the time. Till then, seeing you always in happiness and in health. You take care of yourselves and, enjoy. See ya. You're such a funny rat.